The chair now recognizes from the independent minority Representative Edcel Lagman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May inquire from the chieftain of the NCIP whether there is a specific amount in your proposed budget allocated for anti-dissident activities?
Director ko po yan.
Madam Chair, Your Honor, there is none in the budget of over 1.5 billion that we're undertaking an anti-insurgency movement. It is in the whole of nation approach that discussion on the insurgency are discussed, and most of these are hosted and sponsored by the funds available to the National Task Force LCAC Secretariat. But the funds which are submitted since 2019 does not put there that they will be advancing the anti-insurgency campaign.
May we know, Madam Chair, whether the agency proposed a budget for anti-dissident activities to the DBM?
Chair ko po yan.
Typical budget requirements, you can see it in the budget of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, the Philippine National Police. As I mentioned, Madam Chair, Your Honor, wala kaming proposal po sa aming budget that specifically mention about the anti-insurgency campaign.
These are two different questions. My question is whether in your proposed budget, which we are hearing now, there is an amount allocated for anti-dissident activities, and you said no. My next question was whether you proposed to the DPM any amount for anti-dissident activities, and you said wala rin. In other words, Madam Chair, the NCIP has no funds to devour dissidents, so to speak. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Salamat, Rep. Lagman. Of course, at this point, memorize natin ang rules. 5 minutes lang po for questions. Chair recognizes Representative Rufus Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Chair Stella Kimbo, our distinguished colleagues who are present here this afternoon, and of course, to Chairperson Yusek Alvin Kapuyan, and all the officialdom of the NCIP. Madam Chair, based on the proposed budget of the NCIP, remember that the Philippines is a tripartite country. Christians, Muslims, and Lumans, or indigenous peoples. This is the agency that takes care of our indigenous peoples from Batanes to Jolo, to Tawi-Tawi. But I am amazed that their budget is so small. In fact, the only of the 5.268 trillion budget, the budget of our indigenous peoples, the first ones, the first nation, the first group of indigenous peoples before the coming of the Spaniards and the Americans and the Japanese were the indigenous peoples. However, the proposed budget was very small, only 2.8 billion pesos. That was the proposal. And do you know how much DBM sadly gave them? 50% only. And imagine a tripartite country where one segment of society which is more in need of our support, being in the rural areas, in the upland areas, in the mountains and hills of our country, they were only given 1.468 billion. Madam Chair, 1 billion, 468 million only. It is clear, Madam Chair, that there is a cut of 1.4 billion. In fact, their budget this year is 1.5. And for 2023, it will be reduced by 36 million. It's more reduction, but it shows the neglect. It shows the non-attention of the national government to our indigenous peoples. And Cagayan de Oro hosts the Higaonon tribe. You know, Cagayan de Oro is a small city. It has the lowlands, and then just about 5 kilometers is already the mountains and the hills. They are there, Madam Chair. And yet, they were given 1.4 billion. And so I asked our dear chairperson, is this 1.4 enough to give justice to our indigenous peoples all over the country?
Madam Chair, Your Honor, 1.4 billion is not enough as a budget for the ICC's IPs because, as I mentioned, the universe of the IPs is 1,500 ancestral domain. And with that 11 building blocks, we evaluated it and we found out that we have, for the last 25 years, NCIP were only able to accomplish 25% of its mandate, or an average of 1% a year, Your Honor.
How much would you need every year to be able to get the 75%? They cannot wait anymore. You know, the Philippines has been earlier in 1417 discovered by the Chinese. And from that time on, in the records of the Ming dynasty under Emperor Yongle, already the Philippines existed, and these are our indigenous peoples. So therefore, how much do you need?
Madam Chair, Your Honor, as early as 2019, we proposed to the Office of the President an amount of 3 billion a year for the next 10 years to catch up the situation that we finished the 75% in 10 years po. Madam Chair, Your Honor.
Very clear, Madam Chair, only 3 billion. What a small 0.0001% of our trillion budget. And therefore, Madam Chair, it is our duty. This is now a duty for all our members of Congress to look at this sector having been neglected for the past 30 years. And therefore, it is our duty, and we should therefore exercise our wisdom, collective wisdom of all our representatives to be able to unite and with our power of the purse, reverse this trend of inattention, this trend of neglect on our indigenous peoples. That is why I waited, Madam Chair. Even if there was a very long line in the Department of Public Works and Highways, I waited for this particular hearing of the NCIP because we cannot wait any longer. Our indigenous peoples, brothers and sisters, cannot anymore wait until they need our support, Madam Chair. So therefore, Madam Chair, we ask for more budget for our IP scholarship. We give more budget for those board exam takers who are IPs. And therefore, Madam Chair, I move that we approve the budget of 1.4 billion plus, and it's the most important point, plus 1.4 billion to be able to give them 2.8 billion. Thank you, Madam Chair. Exact on time.
Thank you for leaving. Oh, exactly lang. Rep. Rodriguez, we take note of all of your motions, which we will consider at a proper time, and you will be happy to know that beginning next week, we will have our plenary debates. Panahon na para makapag-propose ng amendments, Rep. Rodriguez, but not now.
It's a slight manifestation. I agree with him because I'm Ibanag. I'm one of the indigenous peoples here in the Philippines. Kung magsalita, permit me to speak Ibanag. Makasta nga umata ni kumungaming, so Ibanag, taga Isabela, taga Kabagan. And so mabe-benefit po ako sa sinasabi ni Congressman, my good mentor, Chair Rufus Rodriguez. So I'm in support of this measure. Thank you, Madam.
Salamat. Rep. Albano. Brodante, Marcoleta.
Madam Chair, nung pong nakaraang ilang araw na nasuspend po ang hearing or briefing ng NCIP dahil meron po tayong mga kasamahan na tinutuligsa yung budget na di umano'y nagagamit po sa tinatawag nilang Ayan, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, Your Honor, that was the center issue that NCIP, specifically the chairperson, is conducting red tagging activities. Your Honor.
Madam Chair, gusto ko pong samantalahin ang pagkakataong ito to ask the chairman of the NCIP. Did you bother to look into the English dictionary if there is a word red tagging?
Madam Chair, Your
Or
Honor,
red tag?
there's no such,
Meron po ba?
wala po kami na-encounter na salitang red tagging. Madam
Meron
Chair,
po
Your Honor.
kasi, Madam Chair, meron po ako nakita, red panda, red tide, red wine. Maski na yung dictionary po natin dito sa library na napakakapal, hindi ko po nakita yung red tag. Kaya ako po yung nagtataka kung bakit pinipilit na isangkot yung salita na wala naman sa English dictionary. Patawarin na po ninyo ako sapagkat hindi ko po talaga alam ang isang salita kung wala naman sa diksyonaryo. At kung ito ang magiging batayan na gagamitin pa para i-defer ang isang budget ng isang masasabi nating napaka-importante ring agency. At hindi naman ako nagtataka kaya nga lungkot na lungkot si Honorable Rufus Rodriguez sa napakaliit na parang pitans, parang kumbaga alam po niyo Madam Chair, sa paghahalintulad na lang, parang budget na para sa dagang dingding na lang. Alam mo Mr. Chair kung ano ibig sabihin ng dagang dingding? Madam Chair?
Chair, Your Honor.
O sige, sasabihin ko sa iyo. Ang daga kasi, mahirap talaga yan. Pag sinabi mong daga ka, mahirap yan. Yung dagang dingding, ito ang pinakamahirap sa mga daga. Totoo ito. Kaya nga, ako kaninang nagtatalumpati ang aking matalik na kaibigan. Talagang, totoo naman Kasi kung yung pong bahagi ng inyong pondo na ginagamit doon sa tinatawag ninyo, kasi pinapakinggan ko kayo meron kayong legal basis po Yung tinatawag nating whole of nation approach to help the government dito po sa pagkuhan natin ng kapayapaan para mapahinto yung mga local communist armed conflict. Kung sakasakali pong nagagamit ang konting barya na yan sa pagdulong sa kapapayapaan ng ating bansa. Kasalanan po kayo, Madam Chair.
Check po yan.
Madam Chair, Your Honor, palagi ko po hindi because the higher calling of the agency is to make sure the recognition, respect, and promotion of the rights of the indigenous peoples.
Ang totoo po, Madam Chair, nakasulat po naman letra por letra sa ating saligang batas. The state may call upon its citizens to defend the state. Tama po ba yun, Madam Chair, Your Honor?
Madam Chair, Your Honor, tama po siya.
Ngayon po, kung sakasakaling nakagamit tayo ng konti sa mga ibinigay na pondo sa inyo upang ating matugunan ang pangangailangan ng Estado sa pangkalahatang kapayapaan ng mga komunidad. Because I understand, Madam Chair, that these communities, these indigenous cultural communities and groups of indigenous peoples are vulnerable communities. The NCIP has the obligation to make them resilient, make them strong, capable of repelling the factors that might weaken their way of life. Kasi po kung malakas ang ating community, Madam Chair, di ba mas malakas po ang ating republika? Sakaling sa pagtugon ninyo sa mandato ninyo, meron po yatang Republic Act na pinagbabatayan ninyo na kailangan po ninyong tumulong sa whole of nation approach sa kapapayapaan ng ating bansa. Tama po ba yun, Madam Chair?
Check po yan.
Tama po, Madam Chair, Your Honor.
Kahit na po wala sa dictionary yung red tag, ang parang pagkakaintindi kapag sinasabi nila yung red tagging, parang nagle-label tayo ng isang grupo ng tao na parang makakaliwa. Ganun ang pagkakaintindi, hindi po ba, Madam Chair, Your Honor?
Yes, Madam Chair, Your Honor. Ganun po ang parang pinaparating na mensahe pag nag-red tagging po.
Pero kailangan mo pa pang mag-red tag, Madam Chair, Your Honor. Hindi
Madam
ba
Chair.
kilala mo na rin sila kung sino-sino sila?
Kaya nga po, Madam Chair, Your Honor, ang ginagawa po, hindi lang NCIP, pati ibang ahensya ng gobyerno ay nagtutruth telling siya. Sinasabi niya ang katotohanan at binasi natin ito sa bagong labas po na Unmasking the CPP na 2 taon po na ginawa ng mga Communist Party members. At ito po ay inilathala para makita ang katotohanan na ito ang tunay na mukha po ng communist terrorists sa kanilang tinatawag na revolutionary dual tactics at lies and deception po.
Yun nga po, Madam Chair. Hindi mo naman kailangang gamitin na natin yung salita na yun. Hindi mo naman kailangang mag-label eh. Hindi mo naman kailangang mag-red tag eh. Kasi kilalang kilala naman sila ng ating mga kababayan. Identified sila eh. Madali silang makilala, Madam Chair. Kapag ka ang budget ay budget ng armed forces, pagka ang budget ay budget ng National Police, itong mga institusyon na to, Madam Chair, ang talagang itinalaga ng ating pamahalaan para talagang yung integridad and sovereignty ng ating bansa ay mapanatili. Ito ang kanilang pipiliting susuklayin. Talagang bubusisiin, talagang pati kalit-liit ang pondo o barya diyang kinakailangan nila. Para bang hindi importante sa kanila. Nabigyan natin ng pondo ang mga hensyang sila ang tagapagtanggol ng seguridad ng ating bansa at ng ating mga mamayan. Hindi ba kilala mo sila, Madam Chair, Your Honor?
Madam
Rep.
Chair,
Marcoleta, before you reply, Rep. Marcoleta, your time is up. Chair ko po yan.
Madam Chair, Your Honor, halos karamihan sa kanila ay kilala ko po dahil ako po ay naging former military officer at most of my assignment po ay sa Scout Ranger kung hindi po sa intelligence operation po, Your Honor, Madam Chair.
Salamat. Rep.
Salamat po.
Marcoleta.
Salamat po. Pero bukod sa iyo, kilala rin sila ng ating mga mamamayan. Tama po?
Sigurado po yun na Madam Chair, Your Honor, dahil sila ang nakahahalubilo sa araw-araw doon po sa mga ancestral domain. Madam Chair, Your Honor.
Kindly wind up, Rep. Marcoleta.
Salamat po, Madam Chair. Salamat, Your Honor.
Napakahalaga talaga ng NCIP dahil nag-i-interpolate ngayong hapon ay ang pinakamahuhusay na abogado ng Kongreso.
Just a
Rep. Lagman.
manifestation. Madam, thank you. Madam Chair, language is in the process of a continuing evolution. There are terms of recent vintage which are not found in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, but they are being used and they are being understood with their good or bad connotations. So I would just like to say that even if red tagging is not in the Webster, with Merriam-Webster dictionary, it is understood. The head of the NCIP understood what is red tagging. It's actually derogatory to the victims of red tagging. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Salamat.
Madam
Rep.
Chair,
Lagman.
1 minute reaction.
Yes,
I will
please
fully
proceed.
agree, Madam Chair, that language or even specific phrases, even vernaculars, undergo evolution. Yung etymology nga ng language will probably but in the devolution, Madam Chair, of a language, no one single group can impose its own definition of a particular word. Sa kanila lang nanggaling yung red tag. It should not be imposed on a society. Kinakailangang mapag-isipan natin kung tama nga yung pagkakagamit. No one group. It will take one generation. We're speaking siguro 137 languages today, Madam Chair. Pero lahat ng lingwaheng ito, vernacular man, mapa-Pilipino lahat. Generations po ang pinanggalingan yan. So pag ginamit po lang ngayon, red tag, it's only used by one single group. Hindi magka-qualify po yun kagad. Kailangan dumaan sa proseso talaga. Sa ngayon po, masasabi ko talagang wala po sa dictionary at hindi ko po naiintindihan. Kailangan nila sigurong ipaliwanag mabuti at gamitin natin ng malaganap para sa ngayon, ma-internalize natin na yung pala yung pinag-uusapan natin. Salamat po, Madam.
Salamat po. Patuloy na natin ang talakayan tungkol sa panukalang budget ng NCIP.